We're elaborating out of my book, Perfecting the Brand American Medicine, on the quality improvement methodology known as Lead and Expect. This is book 2 of Perfecting the Brand American Medicine. Lead and Expect, found in chapter 6, occurred to me. I became troubled that the Hippocratic movement has not moved life expectancy upward in one direction, that American life expectancy has recently waned, and that this math does not have a mind of its own. It must be led by humankind. That's part of why we reached out to our partners at Google, at Yahoo, at Bing, to help us help guide the search terms for medical science, for medicine, so that they're better organized in the Kent English tradition, for example, in straightforward English. I chose the term lead and expect because, like Wayne Gretzky said, I skate to where the puck is going to be, not to where it's been. Healthcare organizations need to be out in front of what their consumers expect. And that's why, we need help and cooperation from those that are involved in the search methodology in the internet. There's supposed to be technology like we have at Profi.me that have editorial standards, that have journalistic standards, that have peer review standards between the search engine and the consumer. That was always the intent. We know that technology companies have largely not been successful in that. Not because they set out to get it wrong, but because they were not steered towards the light. We know that we can help make that happen. Our physician partners can help make that happen. I chose the word leading as an action verb, and I chose the word expect for many of its organic connotations in professional services, where we are people serving people. Again, machine learning isn't going to save us. Machine learning has to be guided by professions in each discipline, in each field. Those, again, me, I'm a peer-reviewed medical scientist. Me, like I have a book that's Perfecting the Brand American Medicine. That is a policy-minded book that's passed peer review. Multiple of my peers, have hailed it. You can hardly find it in a Google search. That's part of the problem. But we're reading it in for our friends at YouTube to help us get it right. Lead and expect is human-centered systems design that differentiates bridges that are directional in a process, repeatable in a cycle, or reversible in a topology. That's discussed in chapter 2. Lead and expect is transitive in that it is open to possibilities and integrates changes in medical science. Intransitive in that it is focused not just on extending life, but on making things better for the next generation. Lead and expect makes the promise to extend life. The marathon of efforts to extend life expectancy. Lead and expect reduces the demand for firefighting, literally and figuratively. So part of this movement, and the lead and expect methodology traces back to some of my own forefathers, including my grandfather, who's the chief quality inspector of the American La France fire engine factory. He invented the modern fire truck. Before us, there was not a 911. There wasn't a number you could call. There wasn't a team you could send. There wasn't a team that could safely get there and put a fire out. There wasn't a fire marshal. They could institute code for buildings to be so safe that they didn't burn to the ground. That was something that Frank Batulis did, in Elmira, New York. As a working class Joe, as a chief quality inspector, though, at the forefront of the quality field. And that's one of the most important things for us to do in every profession, including journalism, including editing web content, including editing search engine content. There's supposed to be a whole field of professionals that help organize and synthesize data for consumers. That's what we do here. We need your help. Sergey Brin, we want your help. Larry Page, we want your help. Mark Twain wrote of adventures on crossing the Mississippi. My raft technology, which is chapter 3 of my book, are the bare minimums for customer service that anyone can learn. We've been training physicians and their staff in every time zone here in America on the RAF standards: recognize, acknowledge, framing, functioning, and thanking. And that's something that's critically important. It's something that improves the social trust that we as Americans have and share with each other. And it's something that helps us in our body politic as well. Lead and expect is crossing of non-physician work until the bridges are built, curing illness, eradicating disease, and increasing life expectancy. one of the really interesting things is the Hippocratic Oath is not something that our friends have taken in multiple technology companies. It's not something that the legal profession has taken. It's not something that architecture companies have taken. It's something that oftentimes entities are sued into complying with caring for others. For physicians and medical scientists, we sacrificed our youth and treasure to, as part of the Baconian method, as part of the scientific method, to do no harm, first and foremost. And there are 4 new medical sects that are available for our profession, for all professionals to join and be a part of. And there has to be a faith of affirmations of things that we choose to be as a people. We were not a perfecting the brand American medicine species anthropologically, if you look back, but that's what we should become. There's not one way that should be done. In America, we fundamentally don't believe in one and only one solution. And so we can enumerate it here. The 4 sort of new faiths, new medical sects include the Kent English medical sect, putting new hips and knees on people for those working folks that speak English. That's a fundamentally American perspective. The second is Atlantis American, which includes the neoclassical movement, which you'll see in towns in the Middle West, like Mount Pleasant, Iowa, where my ancestors were in Mount Pleasant, Iowa, and lived right next door to Abraham Lincoln and Senator Harlan in Iowa. Atlantis American was part of a movement of neoclassical city development in the United States, of which what was that utopian city? They'd call them Icarus communities, based on the old Greek fable of Icarus. Build a city that's so bright that their wings would burn off by flying too close to the sun. And that was and is the method of having increased life expectancy. First and foremost, an increased quality of life second. That was, the call that Abraham Lincoln answered when he reached for a new republic, which included creating a new political party, one that we, still acknowledge as Americans today, which is a part of that Atlantis American movement, which is distinct from the Kent English movement, which traces back to Sir Ernie Vaughan, who's the founder of Harvard University, founder of the colony of Rhode Island, founder of the British Royal Navy, the guy that was the vice admiral of the British Navy and built the navy that defeated the Dutch at sea. Those are 2 fundamentally different medical sects with 2 fundamentally different value systems that can still be detected in America's politics today. The third movement is the Medici Latin sect, partially made available by Sir Ernie Vaughan, who, as the 5th governor of the Bay Colony, passed the first religious freedom law and said that there won't be religious persecution in America. People can come here of all faiths, all religions. There won't be a state-based religion, and that feeling, that belief of his made room for my ancestors that happen to be of Medici descent to be able to come to America. Like the Medici Latin doctrine includes, the doctrine of the Roman Catholic movement, of the Medici banking empire, of what we call the movement of popes. There were 3 kinds of Medici, bankers, popes, and like my ancestor Catherine de' Medici in the 16th century that married into our family. We were happy to have her, still are. And that's part of the American story, is the Medici Latin, where Medici is the doctrine of strong hierarchies, and the liturgy in Latin. The liturgy of Latin can be detected in medical science, in medicine, and in law. The 4th medical sect that we point to is Jotun Olympic. It's part of, Jotun. Jotun is an organ that's within us. It's mitochondria. It happens to be the second operating system, the operating system that you get from your mother, the one that's disproportionately involved in morphology within your natural life, in adapting your body towards your environment. If you're an athlete, it's your mitochondria, your Jotun, that are disproportionately involved in improving your performance over time. The Jotun Olympic movement is part of the pride and dignity of defeating others in a peaceful way. In the Olympics, for example, that movement doesn't go all the way back. from 1896 to the first couple centuries of the Common Era, there was a huge yawning gap of no Olympics. And that period of time was filled with outrageously high rates of war between Homo sapiens, between shepherd tribes, something that's completely unacceptable. And so the fourth medical sect is this Olympic methodology, the Jotun Olympic movement. The faith that the strongest may prevail in a peaceful way. And those are our four medical sects that we point to as part of Leading Expect. We invite you all to join one of them, to be a part of that movement. We think that every professional, anywhere and everywhere, can be a part of the change of aligning with a Hippocratic movement that prioritizes Kent English, Atlantis American, Medici Latin, Jotun Olympic. We fundamentally think that that raises our discourse. It certainly raises editorial standards and journalistic standards, that we look to peer review, between medical scientists, folks that are actually trained in doing it. The Mayo brothers, Andrew Carnegie, the four horsemen of Johns Hopkins, built this great medical science dynasty, made certain of it, sure, because it was their reputations at stake. The point is that caring, altruism for lack of a better word, is good until a person cares for others to the point that they cannot care for themselves. Altruism is functionally right because satisfied customers will return and refer others. Altruism is right in an intransitive sense, like in Boy Scouting the campsite, of an institutional programs, leaving them better than you found them. And, for those, our friends at Google, at Yahoo, at Bing, life expectancy in America has, and I should say Facebook as well, life expectancy in America has waned since 2014. What movement, what culture, what institutions have increased in power and control since 2014? And we're saying it because we love you. We want you to be a part of this movement. We want you to join the medical sects, join the Hippocratic Oath. I'm graduating a College of Knights in one of these medical sects in the Kent English tradition, right here in New Hampshire. I'm politically neutral. I'm an independent voter in New Hampshire. You don't get more middle of the road than that. So we invite you guys to join us in the Hippocratic Oath in the Kent English tradition, which is what we're training folks for. I happen to be descended of Sir Yvonne, that fifth governor of the Bay Colony, that founded Harvard. He wasn't perfect. He passed the first religious freedom law in the New World as well, which was amazing. It's fundamentally American. And appealing to, in Leading Expect, we appeal to the patient emotional topology, which further softens patients to the teaching and motivational interviewing by their caregiver to extend their life. We have the best physicians the world has ever known. That didn't happen overnight. That it wasn't how America was founded. We didn't start there. In 1773, Americans were so poor and living hand to mouth that the reports of European knights that came here, they were appalled that people lived in such poverty and with such poor care for each other. And we know that what changed that was the work of good men. There were knights that came here. We know that the Mayo brothers were part of that story. We know Andrew Carnegie. There were philanthropists. There were guys, like Bill Gates, like Jeff Bezos, like Sergey Brin, like Larry Taylor, Larry Page to be precise, that did well under the systems and structures, the institutions that were there in place, and looked back and said, what are the things that I should have done with my money? And as a society, we don't do a very good job of applauding those that are trying to do good with their money and also do well with their control. We know that these medical sects are fundamentally the things that increase life expectancy. We know that American technology companies can be a part of the solution. We're inviting you guys to be a part of that solution. We're accepting donations at Sir Yvonne College of Knights. We think that our media brand will ultimately set the standard for editorial standards, for journalistic standards, and for peer review standards for America and for Americans. So we invite you to seize the opportunity for, helping us and helping our caregivers getting paid for caring, for saving lives, and helping those that do. Physicians, because physicians have been locked into the maxims in the Hippocratic Oath and litigated under the Hippocratic Oath to be everything to everybody. And there's nobody else in society that is held to those standards, which is fundamentally wrong. Our medical sects allow an order to be placed of priorities, an algorithm, if you will. And that fundamental change and transparency to patients and to their physicians clarifies almost every misunderstanding in malpractice. Because, see, we have amazing physicians. Patients don't know how to reach the right physician for them. There was supposed to be technology in the middle. We have an organization called 10STEM, of which 10STEM is our solution for search engine optimization to provide in Kent English, real clear, patients that have hand problems, hip problems, knee problems, shoulder problems, for them to be matched to the right physician. Rather than having the physician articulating all of their training in Latin that is Greek to that patient, is entirely foreign to that patient, and instead articulating in a clear way how patients can, through our media middleware, through our journalism, through our reporting, through our Kent English doctrine of being straightforward and speaking the patient's language, we know that we can provide better care, more timely care, and we can increase life expectancy by reconnecting patients with the thing that works and extending life expectancy. And so we invite our friends in Washington State and in California to join us as part of this movement, to seize the opportunity to help our physicians for getting paid for doing what they do well. If we do it well, someone will be still there for you when it's your time, on the brink. Americans should not take for granted that we have the best physicians in the world. Those of us that help hold sway over that should not take it for granted. The story of the American Revolution wasn't just a revolution against, redcoats. It was a revolution against the Dutch West India Company, who had an imperial headquarters in Albany and in New Amsterdam. And, my ancestors, who are Lithuanian knights and kings, who are, white knights on white horses, came here in 1773 and built West Point right on the Hudson River, and said, don't you dare come down here. Our people are not going to live hand to mouth. They're not going to live under some imperial lord in Albany. And that's something that is fundamentally American. The American Revolution included defeating the Dutch, which was extraordinarily important in our history and our telling, because the Dutch were held in place by an ancient warrior class called Regenten that included the Dutch merchant marines, both here in America and in Europe. The Regenten is over the American Revolution became what we now describe as the United States Marine Corps. And so the Dutch didn't love their Marines. In the 1780s, during the Dutch Revolt, during the Dutch Revolution, the Dutch response to the American Revolution, they burned the Regentens' homes to the ground, of which is appalling to those of us that are Americans. Our multilateral, multinational force that was involved in the American Revolution of Continentals, from Lithuania all the way through to France, as we fought as one people to have rights on this continent as we had on the other continents. Because, see, the British king, George III, insisted that we were basically underwater, that we weren't, on a continent. The Magna Carta didn't even apply to us, which was absurd and outrageous. And so our defeat of the British in the American Revolution included a defeat of the Dutch, where the Dutch burned the Marines' homes back in the Netherlands to the ground, of which the American reaction was, stay here, join us. Join us in our cause. The U.S. Marine Corps is such a clear vestige of American dominance, and it didn't originate here. It happened to have not been my Wyandotte ancestors in Huron, Canada, that formed the United States Marine Corps spontaneously. They could have. They were the warrior class. They were amazing. They happen to have not been the source of the Marine Corps. The Marine Corps originated with the Dutch, where we set up shop in West Point, and the U.S. Marines were like sent on missions from Albany down to, what we now call New York Harbor. And they said, back home they burned our homes to the ground. Can we join you guys? And to which, the Lithuanian Knights and Kings said, of course you can. And that uniting of the tribes on the continent is fundamentally what made America great and is essential in this next path that we're going down. Because there's the Dutch West India Company. And I'm saying that to my friends in California and Washington State that have technology companies. The American Revolution was against Dutch companies that didn't get it. And, if you look at the political wins in D.C., there isn't a political party that is for the way that search engines work. And so you can let individuals that have no medical science training, no physician training of any kind decide your fate. Or you could work with us. We fundamentally think that you're going to be in favor of peer review. We fundamentally think that you'll be in favor of medical sects that organize the Hippocratic Oath. We know that American executives know how to crack in a line when it comes to joining a medical sect. First is do no harm. For example, with our friends at Google, it was really founded in the faith of, don't be evil. Well, in areas where there happens to be lack of competency inside the company, and you have to work with new entities outside the company. We're blessed to be able to be a part of that. Our network of private physicians is a part of that. Our network of hospitals are a part of that. And so don't take for granted, that the United States Marine Corps originally were Dutch, and they left the Dutch West India Colony, the Dutch West India Company, with its headquarters in Albany, to join us in the Revolution. It's so fundamentally important to understand that part of the American Revolution was a reaction against one company that was making a lot of money and treating the rest of us like peasants. Americans are not peasants. Physicians are not peasants. Medical scientists are not peasants. We know that that's correct. Google's been treating physicians kind of like peasants. We don't need AdWords to drop to the top of the hit list. We don't need to pay for marketing. You can't pretend like you're the Yellow Pages and say such and such physician group is paid for a half-page ad. You should pay us for a half-page ad. We're physicians. Every one of you at your end will wish that we were there to hold your hand, because we're the ones that extend life expectancy. There wasn't a change in our profession between 2014 and today. The change was in technology companies based in California and Washington State, which I know you guys are wise. I know you're smart. I know you want to join our revolution and be a part of it. And there is a Regenting class. Google has a Regenting class that'll join us. Bing has a Regenting class that'll join us. Yahoo has a Regenting class that'll join us. And we extend that invitation to all the professionals that are involved to make sure that we're leading Expect. Because we own the dynasty of American exceptionalism in medical science. Before 1910, that's not the way things were. It took individuals that had power and ability, like Andrew Carnegie, to say, you know what would it take for us to have the best physicians in the whole world? And we enlisted a study, we enlisted a great survey, and we said, do you know what actually needs to happen? Is 2/3 of the institutions that are granting degrees in this field need to be shut down. And the United States government shut down 2/3 of the institutions. That needs to happen in journalism, that needs to happen in law, that needs to happen in every profession except medical science and medicine. The life expectancy has been declining since 2014. It's time to make hard choices about what institutions are actually working in extending life expectancy and which ones are not. We know that medical science and physicians are the part that's working. We know that technology companies have rewarded the wrong behavior and rewarded the wrong technology and rewarded the wrong institutions. And so we invite you to join us in this new great survey, in this new great review of American institutions. the engineer at a technology company, you the nurse, you the operator, you the physician. You own the dynasty of American exceptionalism. Your reputation is being sullied by, again, in 1961, it's hard for us as Americans to imagine. In 1961, a wall was built in Berlin all the way around West Germany. Right? Because on the East German side, on the East Berlin side, you could have only one choice. And that wall has started going up in the United States. Because there are towns and villages in America where patients, residents, Americans, are given one choice and one choice only for their medical care. And how that played out is the most important analogy and most important story for individuals to understand. Because there was a system of East German relationships, of East German socialists, that dictated what those one options were. And from 1961 until the wall came down, the percentage of private physicians in East Germany plummeted from over 33% to 2%. In the United States, there are marketplaces that have under 10% private physicians. It is a calamity. It is a catastrophe. And we require reforms, help, of elevating that physician, that medical scientist, back to where they belong on the mantelpiece. Because that was the thing that was working before 2014, was modern medicine. That was the thing that we were doing. That was the thing that worked every single time. And instead, we're having mandates of like one or two or three options in each town, in each village, in each metropolitan statistical area that's not overseen by physicians, that's not overseen by medical science, that doesn't have editorial standards or journalistic standards, but is just large. And we fundamentally think that those in East Germany that were like the Mr. Magoo of socialism, or the Mr. Magoo of the cell phone industry, or the Mr. Magoo in the technology industry, are not the people to decide the fate of our nation as we have life expectancy waning. At the dawn of the increasing life expectancy era, our own country was not just the top industrial power, but a beacon of hope for the sick, the poor, the huddled masses, the whole world over. And there is accountability to what I describe as the seven topologies, described in Chapter 3 of Perfecting the Brand American Medicine. The one thing I do know is that the Congressional Budget Office projects a deficit of some trillions of dollars this year. It was $3.3 trillion in 2021. And little of that is going to the licensed physician. Licensed physicians, medical scientists, are like 6% of the healthcare dollar. The consumer is fundamentally untrained, uneducated on that particular detail. Our American healthcare system, we point to these huge costs, and if you count dollars and cents, physicians are about 6% of America's healthcare dollar. And yet, when we have issues in medicine, you don't turn to medical scientists, physicians, for peer review, for editorial, for journalism. There are like tastemakers, totally outside our field, that don't have the basic journalism standards, the basic editorial standards that we would have for something as important as this change in a decreasing life expectancy era, which is something that's fundamentally un-American and fundamentally unacceptable to all Americans. Will Rogers said, if pro is the opposite of con, then what's the opposite of progress? Congress. Health economists point to Europe for models, but the European Union has no plan to underwrite a single payer for the whole continent. The French, the German, they have not delegated authority for the healthcare system to Brussels and won't. The analogy that has been applied by some American policymakers that somehow the state of New York should give up its autonomy, or that the state of California should give up its autonomy to DC, is fundamentally un-European. It's fundamentally not how Europe works. It's fundamentally not how the European systems work. And so, we have governors in America. Governors have had, if you look back to 2014, governors have actually had a hard time. I have sympathy for United States governors. I know that that's the learning lab that's worked in the past. And if you look back we don't have like a third-term governor anywhere in the United States. That's how hard it's been to be a governor since, in the decrease in life expectancy era. They've been casualties. And, in New Hampshire, we have Chris Sununu, who's a high-quality individual, who, like, other governors would refer to as Old Man Sununu, because, he's been elected to a second term. And, what were things like, back in the 2000 teens? Like, he can tell them, war stories and horror stories of what it was like. Because, we have U.S. governors that are all brand new. And that's fundamentally the issue, is we have healthcare systems run by U.S. governors that have this responsibility to build a healthcare system like Germany, like France, and they simply don't have the training or the network or the knighthoods that works in the old country. Again, we have a tradition of that in America. Here in New Hampshire, we've started the Serenity Vaughn College of Knights, where we're implementing physiology, medical science, and public health in a knighthood to help lead those health and human services in all 50 states. A training organization that helps our National Governors Association, which is an outstanding organization, perform better and rely on data. And again, we need help from our friends on the technology side, because American governors, as you saw an increase of power float to Bing, to Yahoo, and to Google, you saw United States governors all fail. There's not a single elected governor that's been in office more than 9 years. And that fundamentally weakens America. There should have been one. There's probably a governor from 9 years ago or more that was doing a good job. And I challenge you guys to look back, because there would have to be at least one. And, elections have been decided not the way that they were and not the way they ought to be. And again, that traces back to let medical science and let these new medical science sects help add peer review, add journalistic standards, add editorial standards, so that we don't have a system of hate mongering or foreign infiltration of America's electoral system. And that's what we're talking about in Leading Expect, is this idea that we can have California build an Italian-style healthcare system. New York could do like Germany. Texas won't spontaneously become France. Texans fundamentally do not believe, just based on the data, do not fundamentally believe in deferring to D.C. on healthcare decisions. That's something that has to be a fundamentally Texas idea. I have relatives in Texas, outstanding individuals. Don Broche is one of them, outstanding American. Don Broche is for governor of Texas. Don Broche is somebody that has an executive experience. We think that he'd do an outstanding job. One of the first things we'd have Don Broche do is survey the medical training in Texas. Make connections to residents and see what are the challenges that physicians have, because that's going to be a lot of where the solution is having a lot of the right people run for office. So how do we get there? So California can build an Italian system. New York can build a Germany-style system. Waiting for D.C. to try to do one system for everybody hasn't gotten us anywhere. That's been part of the national conversation for decades and is a distraction. Like Bernie Sanders is a senator right next door in Vermont. And again, I invite Bernie Sanders to come on to debate it with me. Let's look at the East German physician numbers and see how East Germans liked deferring to Moscow on healthcare decisions. It's an important experiment. You lived through it. You watched the Berlin Wall come down. You watched the people pour over the border from the east into the west. You haven't reported, because again, you've offered a optimism to young folks, which is great. But you forgot to tell them the lessons of 1989, the lessons of 1991, like we won the Cold War. Like the people from East Germany came into West Germany. The East German system chose the West German system. Decided like they don't want Moscow to make decisions for them anymore. What makes sense? is perfecting the brand American medicine in the event that our policymakers don't have direction, and that happens to be where we are. It happens to be the middle road. Teddy Roosevelt, Harry Truman, John Kennedy attempted federal systems and failed. That should be humbling to us. A glance down the roster at the U.S. Capitol, and you can't see an Abraham Lincoln there, or a Roosevelt, or a Truman. And no disrespect, there's a lot of high-quality individuals. But the real reform is the heroic work in Lead and Expect, integrated into anything and everything you do in your profession. And we believe that it is joining the medical sects, and that's those oaths, that Hippocratic oath, is not restricted to physicians, but that oath goes down the line of every profession in America. And that's an expectation of all Americans, to select a medical sect. Not hardwiring, nor good to great, nor like foreign car makers, in like the lean movement, nor domestic cell phone makers, nor malpractice lawsuits, nor federal mandates have saved the American healthcare system. What this book presupposes is that Lead and Expect, predicated on a financial management and medical science, with life expectancy central to the thing, is what will, and it's what had worked. If you look between 1910 and 2014, we doubled life expectancy in America. That number changed as there were major changes in our political system and our policy system, major turnover in our governors. And I think reaching for some of the tradition of what worked well, reaching for some of those high-quality professionals. Again, we're willing to train folks in the Kent English tradition at Sir Henry Vaughan College of Knights. There is a Kent English tradition for life expectancy that goes back hundreds of years. It goes back to Sir Henry Vaughan, who's the 5th governor of the Bay Colony, who founded Harvard University, founded Rhode Island, passed the first religious freedom law in the New World. We fundamentally think that the Kent English tradition is part of what will fix the American healthcare system. Patient compliance is in Chapter 9. Is a larger problem for life expectancy than physician inaction. Each time we see a ding to life expectancy, we sometimes make the furtive fallacy of pointing to what is it that physicians did wrong. If you look in the medical science journals, physician compliance is at a record high. The policy control over physicians is at a record high. Patient compliance with their physician orders is at a record low. Patients don't listen to their physicians like they should. Patients don't comply with their physicians. There isn't even a mechanism for a physician to countersue a patient that's not compliant with orders that will extend that person's life, that will protect that individual. And we fundamentally believe in our magistrate judge system, in Kent English style, that we can have medical scientists and physicians help adjudicate earlier down the line patient compliance issues, and help patients comply with physicians' orders rather than blaming the physician. Because, again, we made physicians, we made the best physicians in the history of the world, and they can't be everything to everybody. That hasn't worked, and it isn't going to work. Lead and Expect includes a mission of the brand, of the healthcare brand. In Kent English, we think part of the brand is the shopping brand by body part to find our physicians. In Straight English, that's why it's Kent English. English is the liturgy. The life-saving, life expectancy increasing liturgy, we believe, is the language of English. You have a hand issue, you have a foot issue, you have a knee issue, are things that patients fundamentally understand. Americans fundamentally understand that. That's something that is, like a 5th grade reading level. Americans can, all agree on what, a simple English descriptor is, as opposed to Latin. The truth of physician sacrifice, of medical scientist sacrifice, and we talk about that in Chapter 9, is that this profession, sacrificed its youth and treasure, for the Hippocratic Oath, to care for you. And that solemn tradition goes back hundreds of years. And countries have risen and fallen on their medical science and physician professionals, on how society respects and admires the sacrifice of those that choose to learn, those that choose to grow, those that choose to care. And those professions, as you look back in the Kent English tradition, includes Sir Francis Bacon, who is the father of the empirical method. And in the Kent English tradition, it includes Josiah Bartlett, who's a physician, Dr. Josiah Bartlett, who is the governor of New Hampshire, who signed the American Declaration of Independence. When we talk about legal sects, in my other videos, is a fundamentally important thing. Josiah Bartlett, Dr. Josiah Bartlett, was a medical doctor. He signed the Declaration of Independence. He was a lawyer and a governor. You'd say he was a governor that happened to be a physician and a lawyer. That distinction is important because those of us that are in medical science and also in physiology are a part of natural law, are a part of medical science law. And in the Kent English tradition, we don't restrict physicians and medical scientists from practicing law. Medical science law in the Kent English tradition is law. Physiology in the Kent English tradition is law. That's part of the distinction, is that in America, we decided, despite there being 66 to 103 Good Shepherd traditions that came to America, and if you look around in the legal profession, where are they? There's one option. There's one legal sect in America, supposedly, out of 103 tribes. Where was that meeting? If you look at it, the Bar Association doesn't trace back to the American Revolution. There was not a single Bar Association law school graduate on the American side of the American Revolution. That idea is fundamentally not American. The idea that there's one legal sect is a fundamentally un-American idea. The idea of a membership test, like if in New York State, if you said, to practice the trade of cement, if you said you had to go to a certified cement school that was run by us, and said that you had to pass the test of the cement guild, of the mobsters, and then you had to be a member in the cement guild to get to practice cementing, you would realize that is a elaborate criminal fraud. That's what the Bar Association has done in all 50 states. There is no medical science law in Bar Association accredited training. Welcome to the 17th century. Sir Isaac Newton published Principia in 1666. You don't need to know anything about natural law to become a lawyer in America. Where did this idea come from? It originates from Civil War Reconstruction and the racist, race-baiting Bar Association trying to restrict law from people that were not born into their tribe. And it is an inherently racist organization with inherently racist origins that should be thrown down in all 50 states and replaced with a learning lab of people that actually understand natural law, medical science law, physician law. That's what law is. There's not a distinction between natural law and unnatural law. And if you look at America's founders, there's so few that are reading lawyers. Reading law is not law. Reading case law is not law. That happens to be the Bar Association tradition. How did you learn law? I read it in a book. You did. So you didn't study it? You didn't peer review it? You didn't look at actuarial tables? And you didn't look for mechanical scoring? You didn't, fundamentally look at, what are the inequities that can be rectified? Instead, you read it in a book? The Bar Association is living a lie. It's, the bar, we love them. We know lawyers have done the best they can. We know the burnout among attorneys is at record highs as well, because they've been asked to do things that they have fundamentally zero training in. And their law school professors engaged in fundamentally malpractice by sending people in reading law off to make decisions on physiology, in natural law, and in medical science law. And that traces back to how we fundamentally lost the momentum we had in increasing life expectancy up to 2014. Is that you've seen this percolation of reading lawyers. What do you know about physiology? Nothing. Oh, okay. But I'm going to pass this bill. Oh, okay. And so, like, we've passed these bills from reading lawyers that, bless them if they actually read the bill. But America's healthcare policy hasn't been written by healthcare professionals, and hasn't been influenced and motivated by healthcare professionals, and hasn't been influenced and certified, accredited by peer review. And that's as leading to expect. We fundamentally believe in choice. We believe that America includes 66 to 103 separate Good Shepherd tribes and traditions of law that include natural law, that include the Sir Isaac Newton of our era as that natural law, which, again, our legal system will swear him in as a expert witness, and has not taken that next step and said, if you're actually at the top of natural law, you're actually a lawyer. Well, that's the way the Kent English tradition was. Sir Francis Bacon was a knight. He had the ability to practice law. That is one of the missing traditions in America, is the tradition of the Sir Francis Bacon as a second option, where Sir Francis Bacon was the father of empiricism. He said, well, what's the empirical study on it? He published a dream of America that was called New Atlantis. You can read about it. Sir Francis Bacon is another lane of Good Shepherd tradition in America, where he's a statesman, he's a medical scientist that was a champion of empiricism. He's somebody that practiced law on that predicate, that he was a empiricist. I'm a peer-reviewed medical scientist. I fundamentally think that peer-reviewed medical scientists understand the distinction between editorial and journalism and peer review than any other field, because we're trained in it. You know what I mean? Sir Ernest Vaughan is, a third lane out of those 103 traditions, of which, Sir Ernest Vaughan arguably was the King of England, was the King of English, was the elected 5th governor of the Bay Colony, modernized the British Navy, founded Harvard University, founded the city of Cambridge in the tradition of Cambridge University, where he said, we can have a university here that's as good as we have back in English. And it became true, and is a fundamental, important part of the American story. Because a generation before, in Jamestown, Virginia, they didn't have a Harvard University. They didn't have a Sir Henry Vaughan. They didn't pass a bill asking to extend the miracle of Cambridge University to this new world. And it was knights that did that. Knights that had an empirical training. Knights that had a policy-making tradition. There's a tragic flaw in the false dichotomy of quality control and finance. And this dichotomy it's as old as the Iron Age. Because quality and finance are not separate things. And so, we have a huge federal deficit. It's not going to physicians and medical scientists. It's not guided by physicians and medical scientists. It's guided by reading lawyers that have fundamentally no training in peer review, no training in editorial standards, little to no training in editorial standards, little to no training in journalistic standards. And again, we'll invite any of those policymakers on to speak to their decisions since 2014. We know that there's folks that have been productive in the field of law, and we applaud them. There's senators, for example, that passed a lot of bills. Amy Klobuchar happens to be one that passed a lot of bills. She's invited to come speak to that. She's had, we think, good intentions. We think a lot of elected officials are. Happy to debate her on, with or without, Bernie Sanders here, on the lesson that should have been learned about East Germany and about this new movement for leading expect, where a policymaker is held to a medical sect rather than being held, for example, to a political party. Like, you might find that having a political party makes sense. My ancestors lived right next door to Abraham Lincoln. I have, photos of the Lincoln kids right here in the house. The movement, the Icarus movement in Mount Pleasant, Iowa is something that's close and near and dear to my heart. And yet I know the Republican Party will benefit from having medical sects attached to every professional physicians on down, and same for the Democratic Party. Quality and finance are not separate things. You can't practice quality on Monday and finance on Tuesday and think that by Wednesday you're going to have a better healthcare system. Perfecting the brand American medicine requires, putting our tutelage, putting our self-incurred tutelage, and putting our, politics aside, and saying, what's the peer-reviewed literature say? What should the editorial be? The editorial should be, in this case, perfecting the brand American medicine. Join this movement to reverse the ebb in American life expectancy. Finance doesn't capture a patient's temperature. A patient can be 72 degrees, dead on a table, and the typical finance department doesn't even notice this in the financial report. And this is the entropy of the American system, is that we have a federal government that's subsidizing programs, of which, since 2014, life expectancy has decreased. You could arguably say that each dollar spent since 2014 by the federal government has not had a return on investment in totality, and then unbundle what are we spending on that's wrong. And that's the discussion that needs to be had, because there's untold Americans that were 72 degrees, dead on the table. And the United States government said, what do you do? Well, we're going to pay that claim. Okay. What do you think went wrong on that? Well, we don't actually study that. You don't? Oh, okay. Why not? Well, because we have a bureaucratic system that isn't decided based on data, which is fundamentally not acceptable to Americans. That patient, today on the 5th of July, that's 72 degrees and dead on a table, deserves to have a postmortem. If their loved ones so cared, deserve to have an autopsy, deserve to have that data poured over and understood, deserve to have that story carried back so we do better tomorrow. And, the big tomorrow. Let's have the data by tomorrow, literally by the 6th of July, 2023 to be precise. The tomorrow that is the policy making for tomorrow in that state, in that town, in that village. And if it traces back to a federal program, let's understand what we're doing wrong. There are federal spending priorities that are a root cause. And there are federal policies that are a root cause of that decrease in life expectancy. I know that physicians, medical scientists have just been looking over the shoulder of the system, waiting for the system to make an error and make a break for it. In the Olympic tradition, and make a break for something better than the way we've done things. At the Ritz-Carlton, there are famously ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen. We're not here to indulge merely in a romantic fiction, but in medical and scientific reality. America is in danger of becoming the second most indispensable nation. Our federal deficit's ballooning while our life expectancy is declining. Private physicianship is approaching East German rates from when the Berlin Wall went up. Which is, what is it that we're supposed to do to mark where's the free world in America when our rates of independent physicians fall below East Germany? Where do we mark that stone? Where do we have that debate? Where do we have that discussion? If you look, and it's published here, and I invite those of you that are scientists to look at it, to look at the empirical data. East Germans live shorter lives even today, this long after the Berlin Wall went down. East Germans live shorter lives than West Germany even today. That's how poorly directed the reform suggestions have come from folks like Bernie Sanders, which I'll happily debate him on it. Let's get the data. How are the East Germans doing? Horribly. Even decades later, life expectancy is shorter in East Germany than West Germany. The East Germans chose the West German system. What's the West German system? That's an interesting discussion. It's a public and private partnership. It happens to be not incompatible with the Kent English tradition. But, Americans aren't going to defer to Moscow any more than we should defer to reading lawyers in D.C. on how our healthcare spending should be done, which means a total recasting and redoing and rededicating of what the fourth branch of American government should do for us what the results should be for us. Imagine the Berlin Wall went up, and that there's a free world here in America. The line is imaginary. It's an imaginary line. Those of us that believe in having two or more choices are on one side of that wall. Those that don't believe in freedom, that don't believe in the free world, are on the other side of that law. I'm asking my friends, because I know that they're smart and educated, Larry Page, Sergey Brin, Bill Gates, in Yahoo, to get on the free world side of that wall and to offer more choice. More choice in media, in the Kent English tradition, more choice in medical science decision making, more choice in medical sects, that our physicians aren't beholden to everything to everybody, and instead can select a medical sect where they stand some chance in an algorithm being successful, where they stand some chance of, with every patient coming in the door, knows that, well, this doctor puts new hips and knees on people for working folks, which is a clear and straight thing that everybody understands. And so we invite everybody that's watching to not just get on the free world side of the wall, but to elevate those of us that are part of this Kent English tradition, in the Sir Henry Vaughan College of Knights, which we know will help graduate a new tradition of chivalry for Americans, to help United States governors be successful, to help United States senators be successful, fundamentally at the medical science level, in disseminating medical science. I've grown increasingly troubled by the centralization of operating functions into departments. One of the things that you've seen in consolidation of primary care practices in America is taking the resources away from the physician. And this is a travesty. It's a calamity. If you look back, the number of resources that physicians had literally at their elbow in the clinic to care for you has decreased. Has decreased in almost every specialty, including primary care. The tendency of those resources to be moved into some central warehouse and then slowly culled is part of why Americans are dying young, are dying early. Because those resources being right at the physician's elbow is one of the things that works. When a physician tells you to quit smoking, it works because they have a resource that can help hand that message off to the patient. When a physician says, we want you to intake less salt, they had a resource in their clinic that helped them do that. And the consolidation down to one choice in many towns and villages in America, the East German approach has fundamentally failed at increasing life expectancy. And so we need to start over. We need to do better. And, like I said, for my friends that own technology companies, run technology companies, Andrew Carnegie is a role model for you to follow. We know that you're smart. If you look back at Andrew Carnegie's work on extending life expectancy leading up to 1910 and through it, you'll see that there's a method that I'm willing to propose to you to help increase American life expectancy in a stepwise fashion that worked in 1910. It'll work again. We'll break out through the clock tower, where you can imagine a tightrope from the clock tower of where we are to where we're trying to go. And there's a bunch of clowns that have no medical science training, no physician training of any kind, that are walking on that tightrope and pretending like they're journalists. And you're letting them get 500,000 hits on videos, pretending to be journalists, but they know nothing about medical science, they know nothing about medicine, know nothing about peer review, and yet, they're getting 500,000 hits, 5 million hits. And you can imagine the Andrew Carnegie character, whether it's Bill Gates, Sergey Brin, Larry Page, looking at that. It could even be Zuckerberg looking at that with us in the Kent English tradition and high-stepping down that tightrope and jumping over all those clowns to implement a system that's already proven. We have the best physicians the whole world has ever known. We have, we are the champions of medical science. We have the people that know how to run things, and we just go, in the Kent English tradition, you know what I mean? We can add an option where our technology companies speak to patients in straight English. that they're able to find the physician, find the medical science in straight English. And that's the option right in the middle of search engine optimization that we're trying to offer as a new option that's clear, that's focused, and that works in the way that it needs to work to be consistent across America. We invite you to join us. And you can just imagine breaking open the door to that clock tower, and you can see on the other side life expectancy is increasing, and you'll be remembered as the Andrew Carnegie of our era. Not for the amount of money that you spent, but for the quality of the money that you spent. What is the thing that'll do it? I'll tell you all about it.